Hey, it's Lee. Welcome to Business Problem Solve. Today, I have the immense pleasure of chatting with the person that I believe is the most beautiful man in the world, and there's a whole host of reasons for this. Mr. Steve Rames, how the devil are you, sir?
I'm absolutely top of the world, Lee. How about you?
Yeah, really good, really good. And just firstly, I just want to thank you so much for taking time out to have this conversation with me. I've been well looking forward to this ever since we floated the idea many months ago,
Mm.
and I just cannot wait to see where this conversation goes. If I'm honest, for a whole host of different reasons. But before I get into those reasons,
Yeah.
who is Steve Rames, and how has he got to that seat today?
Well, there's a story and a half. So Steve Rames is a guy from North Tyneside who well started life out in a loving family that gave him a great kick off. Lots of supportive people around him. He met. He started off on a YTS scheme, good old Maggie, and a YTS scheme back in 1985. Um, it was only just supposed to be a summer job, but it turned into a career. I was lucky enough to come across a lot of very, very, very strong mentors, people who just put their arms around me and give me a leg up. Um, and so my career sort of steadily moved through, always in operations, always manufacturing. I'm a manufacturing kind of guy. And then got into the business improvements. First, believe it or not, with Six Sigma, the pretty deep mathematical sort of Six Sigma, the real stuff. But always with lean, I sort of I had this thing from a very early age. I mean, right back to the YTS when I first did my first ever Yamazumi Kaizen. I didn't know it was one of those at the time. It was just bloody common sense. Lean is to me really quite common sense. So I sort of worked through the business sort of troubleshooting and operational leadership, and ended up a global director of a Fortune 100 American corporate, which is not bad for a YDS
Wow,
guy from Tyneside, coffee boy to corporate director. So that's it in a
amazing.
nutshell.
I mean, there's a few things I just want to talk about there. What do you think people saw in you?
Uh, I've always been enthusiastic. I've always been honest, and I've always wanted to work hard. Um, and the honesty and work ethic really sort of comes out of my first ever mentor, my father, um, who he was an ordinary kind of working man, who had a real larger than life personality, um, and just this he sort of instilled honesty in me from an early age by asking me a whole bunch of questions. I was a fairly mischievous boy, and he would ask me a lot of questions that he already knew the answer to, and I always knew that the punishment for lying would be far greater than the punishment for breaking a window or whatever it is misdemeanor that I'd done.
Yeah,
Um, so I got to learn that sometimes it's kind of hard to be honest, but actually in the long run it's good to be honest. Um, I mean, he just worked like a trooper to keep us all fed and watered and a roof over our heads. And it was just seen as something that, you know, he didn't necessarily always have the best jobs in the world, but he would always say to me, son, he says, whatever job you've got, you just do the best of it, and and you get on with it, and things will happen for you, and that's exactly what I've done right from day one. Starting out on a production line, I wasn't over enamored. I had some ideas of being an engineer, um, and so production work, very, very repetitive. It's right. It's right against everything that I ever wanted to do, really.
Yeah.
But the words just rang into my head. All right, just do it the best you possibly can. And so I stuck in, learnt me trade, just kept on trying to get a little bit better every day. It was the way to stave off the boredom. It was no more than that. So when I was lucky enough to work for a very, very small company, and they started to grow, and as they grew, other people came in, and so I would start to train those people. And then, that started opening me up to the whole leadership side of things, which was a great place to exercise laziness, if I'm totally honest. It just didn't seem like quite as much work. It didn't turn out that way, but anyway, that's where my head was as a stupid lad. And so I just kept on in there. But the big driver was that ethic of honesty and work hard and do the best at what you've got.
Yeah, love that.
And it speaks to later on in life. You do the universities and all the rest of that, and you suddenly realise that what we're actually talking about there is the sphere of influence. And if you concentrate on what is within your sphere of influence, then your sphere of influence grows. And I've very much seen that firsthand. So that's been it. But I've always had just a lot of good fun. I've always wanted to have fun in whatever I do. And I think it endears people to you, and they want you around. And so I don't know. I'm like the most highly promoted class clown, I think.
So just that about having fun and things. You are, Steve Rames, the only person that I have ever known who's gonna go on holiday that's had to give a leaving speech. Which I think is a testament to you as a person and how much everybody will miss you and the impact that you make. So I think the fun part of it comes out in every single interaction that you have with everybody. Have you always had fun?
Yes. Let's think. I mean, in the early days. So let's take you all the way back there to the YTS scheme. So you've got a whole bunch of guys. I took it on as a summer job. That was it. I was going to college to do an HND in heavy engineering or some such thing, because all I was really ever good at was tech drone and metalwork. I had this huge enthusiasm around new technology, around computers. I had a little home computer, and I was trying to teach myself to program. Well, I was a fairly accomplished sort of home programmer on that little spectrum. And I saw this YTS that was all about computers and electronics. So I sort of jumped at that chance, and I got the opportunity, saw it as a summer job. It was so much different to school because we would backtrack, chat, and try and get a rise out of people, but it was a much more adult thing. So you found that they just started laughing back and laughing with you, and you thought, well, this is a different dynamic. As a school teacher would have thrown something at me, and so we quickly sort of got that level that, all right, we can have a bit of fun with this. But we also became very aware that these people that were training us were industry professionals that were sort of at the end of their career, and they were just giving a bit back. And so they just had so much to offer, real great caliber guys. And so, they would make learning fun as well. And you just thought, well, this is the way that we want to go. And so we, carried on doing that. And then I would use, in the workplace, it was, as I say, it was a small business. It was quite. We used to have a lot of fun in that as well, and it was a way to diffuse tension. Really, there was a lot of tensions about. It was as with any small business, cash is king. So there was a lot of stress about not really having enough resource around you to do what the customer needed, and we just had to get on with it. And the way to diffuse that tension is just to have a bit of a laugh with it. And then later on in the career, when I was sort of doing plant turnarounds and things, I'm jumping quite a way now. I recognised that the first plant real turnaround that I was doing, I recognised that I walked in with a team that were just so stressed. I mean, it was palpable. These were grey-faced guys. That were just a shadow. I mean, I never met their former selves, but I was guessing that they were a shadow of their former selves. And I knew that in order to get from where they were to where they needed to be, I was actually going to have to put them under more stress. And I've always had a big problem with stress, really, because I've seen what damage it does to people. I've seen, grown men hiding under their desks crying and people that just have heart attacks and pop off and it's not on any health and safety statistic because it happens at home, and you just think, my God, their sort of world killed them. So stress has always been a real thing to beat down, and the thing to diffuse stress is comedy. So I've always liked to make sure that everybody was comfortable with, when we need to do it, we need to do it. But when we're working it out, we can have a bit of a chuckle, and we can, and while we're actually performing, we must perform, but we can have a chuckle along the way, and that's just it. It's so important. My wife's father used to say, a day without laughter is a day wasted, and I think it's more like a quarter of an hour without laughter is a quarter of an hour wasted. So that's been it. I mean, Tynesyde's a jolly place anyway. Everybody looks at it, and it looks a little bit. I mean, not so much now, but it's looked quite dark and industrial in the past, and it's, the pictures you see on the news are of miners or steel workers or shipyard workers that are all sort of out, on strike and throwing bricks at police and things like that. But, behind it all, there's a massive camaraderie that came out years and years ago, that came out of the pits, where you were living next door to the guy that looked after your life on a day-to-day basis. So these people, we would grow very, very strong relationships, and those strong relationships meant that people were honest and open, and therefore you can have fun. If you're honest and open, you can have fun with people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm very, considering you've given us such a big old kick-off here. I'm being very serious, but hey, there's the answer.
So, but I think you're saying there's a lot of value in what you're saying. So far, the three things that have come out of the conversation for me are the importance of fun, the importance of honesty, and the importance of doing your best, or putting all of the effort in. And I think a lot of teams, a lot of people, a lot of leaders can learn a lot from those three things. I think if you were to ask your family to describe you in 3 words, are those, or 3 phrases, are those 3 phrases that they would recognise in you, or is it 3 separate things for your family?
I guess work hard would come through.
Yeah.
I think fun would come through.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think honesty, yeah, I think they probably would. I think I'm very consistent. The things that I always crank on about are, in all things balance, everything has to be balanced. I'm a big believer that life isn't a zero-based game. We don't there doesn't have to be a winner and a loser in all the situations. We can all win if we get together. So, I would like to think that over the years I've kind of drummed that one into them as well. Balance, balance, balance.
Yeah.
Balance between work and play. So you work hard, play hard. But yeah, I'm fairly sure that they would come through. You'll have to get the family on one, or you'll have to talk to the family sometime and verify that.
That could be the follow up, couldn't it? That could be with Steve Ramsey's family. Could be the follow up. That would be amazing. I would absolutely love to meet your family. You have such a zest for life, such a bubbly personality, and you light up every single room that you enter. Every room is a lot quieter without Steve Rames in it. and I genuinely, and that's why I was so excited to have this conversation, so just to really understand more about you and about really what is it that's important to you, and you've touched on a bit of your background and your dad's influence as well. You also spoke about, when you talked about your background, is you moved from operations and to improvement. Was that a natural transition, or was it something that you wanted to do, or was it something you were pushed into doing? How did that happen? How did you end up in the world of improvement from the lofty leadership positions that you'd had?
Well, I kicked off. I sort of worked up a production manager in a small plant in Tyneside, and there we were. It was a small plant. They were in the fire alarm industry, so they were dealing with sort of corporate installations, which are quite heavy on capital. So cash was king. In order to try and grow that business, we needed to be incredibly strong on cash. And the MD had gone through he'd been on an MBA, and he flicked us a piece of paper talking about lean. I think it was one of the papers that he'd written, which I read a little bit of and snatched off a chunk. And I got the word lean and pretty much nothing else. But when I went out in the workshop, we had a bunch of, there are Geordies and there are Mackhams. So Geordies are from north of the Tyne, basically from Newcastle, and Mackhams from Sunderland, and the staff we kind of don't like each other. I mean, we get along, but from a football perspective, we're an absolute disaster. They used to seal off the Tyne Bridge when we used to play football together because they didn't want us sort of invading. Yeah, it was a bit mad. So I used to use that as a motivator. The Mackhams are doing a bit better than you guys, and so the Geordies would kick off and I'd just play each other off, and so. As it sort of grew and we got more and more young lads, because I'd been brought in as a young lad, I did that more. And young lads are messy, they're just messy. So the whole place was a little bit of a mess. And I remember we sorted the place out. We painted the benches in 3 different colours of hammerite. They were metal benches, so. And we sort of created coloured sections, and they had the same colour cups and the tools. I got them good quality tools, but we sort of flashed up their handles and such like, so everybody knew where everybody's tools were. And essentially what we were doing was 5S. We just didn't know that that's what we were doing, and we ended up having this quite sharp looking place. We did point of use material simply because I couldn't afford people to do a kitting operation. So we created point of use materials. All of these terms I learnt later. We did Kanbans to final assembly. Again, it was just a simple way of breaking batch paperwork down. So I always sort of had this in me DNA that we sort of built this out of nothing. And when we were bought out, I was brought down to the southeast of England to a plant there to work for 6 months. helping them out as a manufacturing engineer. And they saw me as this lean guru, because of what they'd seen up in Tyneside, and I didn't realise, but that's what they had me pegged at. And so I got into the plant, and they were saying, "Oh, and look, and this is our Kanban system." And I'm like, "That's your what now? What? And this is, this is how we approach 5S." I'm like, What is 5S? And the guy that hired me is looking at me as if I'm gone out of fashion. He's like, "You do all of this up in Tyneside?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I just didn't know what it was called. We just don't use those terms." And I quickly picked up a lean book and got to be half a page ahead of everybody, and they all thought I was a genius. So that was working pretty well. I was very well within the end of the first week. I was a production manager, but I think by the end of about 2 months, I was the assistant manufacturing director. There's a whole story behind that as well, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm kind of going up the management rungs pretty damn quick here. And the reality is I was going up too quick. And a new manufacturing director joined, a great guy. He's essentially been a lifelong friend, really. I mean, I didn't meet him till I was 30, but I'm getting on a bit now, 50 odd, so 20 odd years. And he was employed to turn the business around, and I had very, very strong ideas of what needed to happen, and he had very strong ideas. So we didn't initially we didn't really hit it off. We worked professionally, but we didn't really hit it off. So to be honest with you, we had a bit of a talking to, and it's possibly the closest I've ever been to being fired. Well, no, it's not possibly. It is the closest I've ever been to being fired. It was very much on the cards. But at that point in time, GE were about to take up. By this time, we were part of Honeywell, because the company that bought us had now been bought by Honeywell. And GE were now buying Honeywell. So it was like small fish, bigger fish, shark kind of thing. And of course, GE are big into the Six Sigma piece. And we'd all been supplied the book, the Six Sigma Way, I think it is, the old blue book. And I'd read through this thing, knowing that I'd really dropped the ball by not reading Ray's paper earlier on in my life. I thought I better read this one this time. And I saw this roll of black belt, which I think that was it GE or Motorola? Anyway, the way that it worked was this person would do some training, and then they'd sort of walk the world for 18 months, 2 years, and really practice the trade and teach it and practice it. And then they'd come back into the business in a promoted role. That was the idea. And I thought, wow, that there is what I want to do. And so we agreed sort of mutually that that's what I would do. And so whether or not that was being pushed, shoved, wanting it, I don't know. It came out of me knowing that I wasn't really working out where I was, and but also really wanting to do what I saw within the book. And so that's exactly what they did. They put me on a Six Sigma program. I then spent about 18 months or so walking the earth as the European business improvements leader. So popping around into a number of the European plants and doing various trainings and Six Sigma projects and troubleshooting pieces here and there along the way. And it was great fun. And true to the word, I was then brought back into the business as the plant manager, and that was my first big plant manager role. Back into operations. I kind of learned to ride the plant manager horse. I was told I was asked to run a plant up in Leicester. At the time, I thought it was being closed, so I didn't really want to go there. And then I was phoned up a couple of weeks later, and the boss said, "Oh, you know, I really need you to do that, Steve." And I said, "Well, we've talked about this. I don't get involved in plant closures. I'm all about the improvement and keeping them up. And oh no, it's all being changed. And oh what, plans are changing." And he says, "Well, plans aren't really changing." And I said, "So what's changing then, Jeff?" He says, "Well, 2 weeks ago I was asking Steve." I'm like, "Okay, Jeff, when do I start?" So I kind of got pushed into taking on another plant, which was actually one of the most rewarding opportunities in my life. I told Jeff at the time, I'm not I shouldn't get into names, but I told the boss at the time, I'm going to fight you on any thought of closure. I'll fight you all the way. And he said, "That's exactly why I want you up there." So we went up, and what a fantastic team it was. And it meant that I could do the lean. We didn't really need Six Sigma. It wasn't that type of manufacturing thing, but we could just do the lean thing now that I was kind of practiced at it, had a few runs at it. The team were just an outstanding team, so they really took to it. And we really did transform, or they really did transform the plant in a very short space of time. And that gave me the opportunity. Honeywell developed a thing called the Honeywell operating system based on Toyota production system. So I was kind of right in amongst the creation of that thing, and working with the guys, working with all of the people that were developing it, and we were really sort of piecing it together. So it was a very, very exciting time on a number of different ways.
Amazing.
And as we got to the end of that, I went back into business improvements as a plant manager development lead. So the idea there was that I would work with plant managers that were new to Honeywell or just struggling, and just help them adopt the Honeywell operating system, help them understand what it was, help them really understand how it affects the metrics that you are being driven to, because it's not always obvious. That's in all things balanced. There's nothing more balanced than a manufacturing site. We want low inventory, but we want fantastic delivery. We want high quality, but we want low cost, and so on and so forth. And so it's in all things balance, yeah. And so we had great fun there, and then off I went as this plant manager development coach who really ended up being a troubleshooter. I was just dropped into many troubling situations, which were a whole lot of fun and total adrenaline. Maximizing the comedy, because you've got to go in there, you've got to build a high intimacy relationship really, really quickly with people. And you can't do that being some dour, down in your boots, or banging the table and telling everybody to come to order. You've got to actually connect with them, and that's one of your three things, that strength of connection. And there's nothing like laughter to strengthen that connection, in my view.
I completely agree. So there's two things I want to pick up on in the conversation that you've just said. Really early in your answer, you said you were promoted far too fast. Is that what you believed, or is that what you were told?
No, it was absolutely belief of mine. So it was quite weird. There was a guy. We'd been playing around with some lean stuff. The site was of the mind that what we needed to do was have half of the landscape was warehouse, and just fill it. They were kind of cash rich, so just fill it full of stock, and you can deliver in 24 hours out of stock. And you've got these big sort of car-style production lines to just keep flying stock in, and that was their idea. The reality is, it's quite bespoke stuff, and it's quite it's just huge variation, and it just doesn't work. You'd never have a warehouse big enough, and you'd certainly run out of cash before you did it. So we've been playing with some lean. And this new guy had come in, he was a troubleshooter. He'd actually come out of retirement. He was a Japanese guy. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. One of the other, or another great mentor of mine, as it turns out. But he was introduced to me by the MD, and well, he wasn't. That was the problem. He wasn't introduced to me, so he just sort of turned up, and I was busy in the middle of this sort of cell layout thing, and he asked, what are you doing here? And I said, this is fantastic, and started extolling all the virtues of what we were doing and how exciting it was and how the people were loving it and how great it was going to make the whole plant, and we needed to just roll it out all over the place. And I was so excited. It was cool. And I was also drinking a shitload of coffee at the time, by the way. And he just said, no, this is shit. He said, this is shit. What we need to do is car-style production lines, fill the warehouse, da-da-da. So we got into this ranting argument, and it really did. In the end, I told him to F off. I told him that he was, going back to the honesty thing, you're an idiot, and you just need to fuck off now.
Yeah.
I'd noticed out the corner of my eye that the MD was slowly walking back, further and further back. And this guy, Peter, just rocked back on his heels, big old laugh. Big belly laugh, and he turned around and he went, he says, I love this guy, and I guess it was just because I stuck up to him, and normally people would just kowtow to whatever he said. He still didn't agree. We never ever did get to an agreement, by the way.
Yeah.
But he sort of grabbed a hold of me, and what he did was the following day, as I came into the plant, on every single door there was a new organization structure, and at the very top of it was Peter Pan, and as the manufacturing director, I think, and the line below it was assistant manufacturing director Steve Rames, and I thought, wow, that's pretty special.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of dead proud of it, which lasted about 30 seconds, because as soon as I got with the lads, They had, the irony was the guy's name was Peter Pan, and I was his assistant.
Yeah.
So now I'm called Tinkerbell. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks very much for that. Yeah.
Amazing.
But what it meant was a little bit later on, the group, I forget the group president came along, and I was ushered in to meet this guy. And I wasn't told why, really, just that he wanted to meet me. And so I started talking to the guy, and he started asking me what the problems were with the Morley business, the stuff that he'd acquired, because the sales had dropped off. And this, bear in mind, it'd been a fairly short space of time, and I'd been asked this question so many times, it was killing me. And so I just give him 4 barrels. I've already said this till I'm blue in the face. I don't know why anybody's not effing listening. Kind of, this is why, and I laid it down, and that was the end of the talk. And I came back out with the MD, and he said to me, Steve, he says, that could have gone better. And I said, well, why? He asked us the question, I gave him the answer. He said, yeah, but it's not really the way you should go on in an interview. And I went, oh, that was an interview? And he says it was an interview for the plant manager. And I was absolutely gutted. And so that another guy came in. I was gutted that I'd let myself down,
Yeah.
But actually, when Jeremy joined, whilst we didn't necessarily see eye to eye, I saw this guy who was not scared of just talking about the business.
Yeah.
To the people. So literally, shop floor, here's the deal about the profit and loss. And by the way, we have to make that work. Now, we have to make all the other stuff work as well. And I want to respect you, but bear in mind that I do have to make all of that work as well. And I loved the honesty and the straight talk of that, and the real pure leadership. And
Yeah.
I look at that and I know that I could not have done that. I would not have led that way and I would not have been as successful.
Yeah.
And my career, what would have happened was I would have got a chunk of cash to just bugger off, and my career would never have gone the way it went. So that's what I mean. So it's
Yeah.
I was never told that I was promoted too quickly, but I knew that. I mean, I guess you could call that a post rationalization. I look in the rear view mirror and know that it was the case.
Yeah.
Uh, if you'd asked me at the time, what one of my other things is, I'm a big believer in what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I say to the kids, just bite off more than you can chew and then chew.
Yeah. I love that. I love
and
that.
and and so I guess I would have done something, but no, it all happened right, I believe, Lee.
Yeah. Amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that. I want to talk about the kids shortly, actually, because you've sparked a question that I want to ask. But before I do ask that question,
Yeah.
you also said in your answer when you were talking about Leicester earlier that it was the most rewarding part. What was it? What was it that made it rewarding?
It was it's kind of a weird thing, Lee. I always pick some things that aren't metric to just decide whether you've gone the right way. So when you finished your assignment, you got to wherever you're at, you look back and you go, all right, well, we've got all of these metrics and things, but what are these few little weird things that are indicators that you really have made a difference? And I always remember, while I was looking for me thing in Leicester, the MD was standing up and he'd been on a bit of a tour with some of the people, some of the customers, and he was just sharing that with the workforce. Yeah, so he would do it in two hits. One where all of the direct labor, because we didn't have a room big enough to fit everybody in. So
Yeah.
one with all of the direct labor and one with all of the sort of overhead labor, if you like. And so I was sitting in the first room with all of the direct labor, so all of the shop floor supervisors and managers. And one thing that I remember was, first of all, the intensity in which they were looking at him and listening to him. You could hear a pin drop. These guys were really bought into the business. And at one point, he said, the one thing that all of the customers tell me is that quality isn't good enough. And they really prided themselves on quality. And there was a sharp intake. I mean, literally, you got, I don't know, a couple hundred people, just sharp intake of breath, all at the same time. It was powerful. It just talking about it puts the hairs up on my arms. I'm just thinking, wow, I've never had a reaction like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's powerful. And I just thought, these people absolutely love this business. They want it, and so as we went around and as we did it, I was sort of challenging them on that and just what it sort of meant to them. And it just seemed like more than a business to them. And it was, they deserved more respect than how they'd been treated and the absolute abomination that they were sort of being forced to live with.
Yeah.
And sometime later, we were asking them to design their own cells out of that old tube and bracket stuff. It's great stuff, that. So I'd set the manufacturing engineers. I said, listen, guys, I says, I know you design the processes, but let's stop. These people know more about the processes than you do. And I know you're super clever and all the rest of it, but all I want you to do is just support them. Make sure they're not doing anything technically daft. Make sure they're not doing anything unsafe. And as long as it's not, daft or unsafe, then let them have their own head and work with them and just enable them. And the manufacturing engineering squad set that up. They set it up beautifully. And in the end, we had this place on the shop floor where somebody would do a full sort of Kaizen, a full sort of video look at the process. They'd break it down, they'd figure it out. That is the team that actually make the product would do all of that work themselves. And a manufacturing engineer would just make sure everything was, as I say, safe and not sort of ridiculously costly. And the ideation that came out of it was outstanding. But the thing that always got me was I walked onto the shop floor at a point, and it was a hot day, and it was a kind of tin shed, as all of these things were. So it was really hot out on the shop floor. And in the place where we make the cells, there was a lady called Indira, a wonderful, wonderful lady who was a grandmother of many, and she was, I think she was probably over retirement age then, technically. She could have, but there she was. And she was working on this massive industrial sort of vise with this great big piece of pipe work. And she's got this this sort of industrial pipe cutter that was a windy up one.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't get everybody hot work. I couldn't train everybody to use still saws, etc. It was just ridiculous. So we had to do it the manual way. And that had been great, and everything was working. But now I'm approaching this lady who is, you know, in the latter part of her career, let's say, and she bent over this vise and she's winding it round, and her hair was down in front of her face. And and as I was walking towards it, I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got to somehow unpeg my entire strategy. Everything I've said to these people, I've got to undo it all. Because this is ridiculous. You can't expect a lady to do this. And this is all bubbling through my head. And as I walked up to her, she sort of looked up naturally, and she was smiling before she caught my eye line. She was smiling.
Yeah.
And when she saw me, she looked straight into my eyes, and her face just blew up, and she rushed over to me and shook my hand with both of her hands and said, "Oh, Steve," she says, "look, I'm building my own cell. Thank you so much for this opportunity." And it's shit like that just stays with you.
Love it.
You know what I mean? And that's what I mean when I say rewarding. Don't get me wrong. I've worked with hundreds of people in hugely rewarding situations.
Yeah.
But that one, well, it was special for those reasons. And all of the others are special for other reasons, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, yeah, I'm a very, very lucky guy, Lee. I've done some very, very rewarding work over the time. And you know, that always makes it easier to smile and have a chuckle as well.
Yeah, I get that, and I imagine that the people who worked with you and have been on the receiving end of some of this, the value and the benefits and the empowerment and stuff, will say that they were lucky as well working with yourself, sir. And you started the conversation saying and sharing how your father influenced you. With some of the things that we spoke about earlier on.
Yeah.
If I was interviewing your kids, what would you hope that they would say about you and how you've influenced them?
Mate, if I'm totally honest, Sunday was Father's Day, right?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, so we've always been ones to make cards. We don't do it all the time, but we very regularly make greetings cards to each other because there's a bit more of you in it. You know what I mean? And there's a bit more, and you can have a bit of fun with it as well.
Yeah.
And so I got two absolutely exceptional and very, very special homemade cards from my daughter 16 and my son 18, they said it all to me, mate. And I couldn't read them out because I'd be in floods of tears. I would probably short out my computer, mate, and bring this whole thing to an abrupt close. But, you know, I don't think they're blowing smoke up my arse. It seems to come from a real place of honesty and love. And so I think I have been an influence, I'm honoured to have the opportunity. To be honest with you,
I
I
love that.
remember, I remember, sorry, I remember my son. He went for an interview at McDonald's, and it was a digital interview. So he came downstairs afterwards, and we were asking him, so what sort of things did they ask you, and and this and that, and one of them was, who's your role model? And Sue said, so what did you say? And and he turned around and he went, well, me dad.
Oh,
And I mean, to be honest with you, that's something pretty special. It's you kind of think it's going to be, I don't know, Spider-Man or whatever the hell they're into nowadays, but um, but yeah, there you go. So I we, I think we've got a very well. I know we've got a very special relationship, both myself and Luke and myself and Emma, and actually it kind of goes all the way around the family. You got Luke today. He was out. He was out doing some shopping, and he rang up his sister and asked her, "Oh, you were looking for a lead, some sort of digital lead. I don't know, a USB type thing. Did you find one? Oh, no, no, no. Well, will I get you one?" And she came off the phone and went, "Oh, I'd forgotten about that." And I went, "Good job, Luke, didn't they?" And so, for an 18, 16-year-old pair of kids to be having that sort of conversation with each
amazing.
other, I think it's just a lovely thing.
It is. It is a lovely thing. It is a lovely thing. Um,
Mm.
if they were to describe you in 3 words, what 3 words would they use?
I don't know. I think mental would be one of them. What three things would they? Ah,
And I don't mean I do mean to push you on this a little bit, only because I think that that your father was such an influence on you. You've been such an influence on your kids. I I think I think it's really important to understand how, and what's important, and just in what you've done and how special you've created it to create the or to co-create the 2 children that you have.
I mean, don't get us wrong. I've spent a lot of time away. I think that Sue takes a massive, massive role
Absolutely,
in modelling those kids to who they are today. That's for certain.
absolutely.
And you know, I'd like to think that they would say, something like loving, something like funny, and I'd love to think they'd say wise, but I don't know about that.
Oh, yeah, one step too far.
Yeah, maybe that's a bit pushy.
Yeah,
But yeah,
amazing, amazing. I love that. And you've chatted a lot through this whole conversation about leadership, about improvement, and about your progression. If you could summarise, in fact, actually, which way should I do this? So if you could summarise improvement, or like the world of improvement, how would you? What's important about improvement for you? Business improvement, change. What is it that's important?
it's all people. It's all about people. It's all about, for me, it's the Deming piece. It's the engaging your people to get the most out of them. To creating that high trust environment, and that allows them to connect to you. That allows them to have that little bit of comedy to diffuse the stress, to open up, be open, and make their problems visible. Um, and all of that comes out of the people piece. It's about that. It's the high trust piece at all levels of the organisation, up and down. Truth's the thing. We've got to get truth from the truth from the guys on the tools has got to be the same truth spoken in the boardroom. All right, you're having different conversations, but they've got to be based on the same truth. And that doesn't happen often enough in business. It's not that difficult to do either.
Yeah,
and it drives me mental. And it makes the likes of yourself and myself look like geniuses when we do very, very simple things. But that's it. Yeah, it's
Yeah, you speak a lot. You speak a lot of truth, Steve. You speak a lot of truth. I think, and the importance of people has come out really strongly in this whole conversation. Whether it's the people that you've worked with, whether it's your family, whether it's your mentors from the past, have people always been important to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think as I said to you earlier, my family, we were by no means the poorest guys on the block, but we were far, far, far away from being, we were closer to that than the richest, put it that way. But the point is that we always had this loving bread style. Well, no, just this base of love. So it's like, they say Englishman's home is his castle. Well, to me, that castle's built out of love. And so I knew that when I was growing up, and you have your little challenges, and I know you look back in the rearview mirror and the challenges that you had as a kid are nothing, and you don't know why you got so wound up about it all. But the point is, at that point in time, it's all you've known, and it's the most stressful thing you've ever been in. But I always knew that there was 3 people back at home that would make it all right. When I shut that front door, there was nothing that could get me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the importance of people. It's that knowing that they're there for you. And so I think my family built that of me, and I've always wanted to build that of my family, and know that, in your darkest day, you're only 10 minutes away from home, and at home nothing can get you. We will sort everything out.
Amazing. And this is one of the reasons why I believe you're the most beautiful man in the world, Steve Rames. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. We're not quite finished yet, because I just want to show you you are the man who's shown me the difference between a hug and a cuddle. So I've got a lot to thank you for. So I think just a few more quick questions. What does the most beautiful man in the world have for his tea, or what's he having for his tea this evening?
Well, I believe now the family are out at grandma's at the minute. She's going to babysit the gerbils while we're away, so the gerbils are busy being rehomed. So they've been sorting that out. Too much information, right? But the talk before we were going out there was that Emma is going to go out for dinner with her friends. So that leaves us open to an Indian, a curry, because we don't eat curry because there's nothing in a curry house that Emma can get around at the minute.
Yeah.
So I believe it's going to be a curry, which is I know what you're going to say. It's a strong choice, Lee?
It's a strong choice. It's a very strong choice for a Monday. Very strong choice. No, it's really good. Really good. And will you be? Just between you and me, will you be using your bib? No. I will be using. I'll be using one of my old painting shirt, mate. Amazing.
Oh my God, the bib!
Amazing.
I can't believe that the bibs made it onto the internet, mate.
No, neither can I. Neither can I. But no, it just seemed opportune. But honestly, no, it's a really strong choice for a Monday. And if people wanted to know more about Steve Rames, and I don't know any reason why anybody would not want to know any more about Steve Rames, where would they go? What would they do? What would they find?
So they would look up Steve Rames on LinkedIn. In fact, I've got one of those names that Rames. If you Google Steve Rames, I think the first I'm one of the top things you get.
Of
and
course,
it's the LinkedIn piece. So yeah, jump onto the LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to talk to anybody who isn't just blindly selling me some, muppetry. I'm happy to have a proper conversation with people. Absolutely.
I love that. No, honestly, Steve, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out today to have a conversation. The things that have really come across today are the importance of honesty, the importance of fun, the importance of working hard, and then lastly, the importance of people. And
Awesome.
and those four things really summarise every interaction that I've had with you, whether you've been teaching me the difference between a hug and a cuddle, or whether I've been observing you and just watching you in action and seeing the magic unfold in front of you. So I think those four things that run through from you, and they've run through this conversation as well. So just thank you so much for the opportunity to chat. Have yourself a lovely, lovely curry this evening, and I cannot wait to have a pint with you very, very soon, young man.
Very soon. Thank you very much, Lee. Real pleasure to talk to you, and I'm really glad if that's the summary that comes through, then I'm very, very glad. It's been a great call. Thank you very much. You're a lovely man.
Cheers, Steve.